Hello, and welcome to this Sommelier series, which pairs speakers to create a perfect exchange of ideas and conversation. And I'm really excited today because I'm a big fan of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. And we have today Jo Aggarwal and Randhula de Silva, who are both very tightly linked to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship requires a lot of passion. It requires someone to be a little bit crazy, obstinate, optimistic. And so it's always fun to meet other entrepreneurs. Jo Aggarwal is the founder CEO of Wysa, which is in the space of AI for mental health. And we'll talk more about that. And Randhula de Silva is the founder CEO of Good Life X, which is an entrepreneurship enabler in Sri Lanka. So instead of me introducing you, maybe I'll request you both to introduce yourself. So Jo, if you would go first and tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, that'll be great.
Absolutely. Thanks, Manas. So I'm also Manas's junior from IIT. So I am dating myself and him a little bit. But my first foray into entrepreneurship was actually in the dot-com boom era, where I remember being 9 months, about 7 months pregnant and trying to raise money for this site, which was an India cars site where you could buy and sell cars called driveindia.com. And we'd spun it out of the Tata Group where I worked. And I remember raising like tens of millions of dollars with, a huge euphoria around the dot-com. And in spite of being 7 months pregnant and very young as a woman at that time, being told that, you just do your own startup and we'll fund you. And of course, that euphoria waned and went. I'm a problem solver, so I've always tried to say, how can I change the world? And did a long corporate career in edtech, then a non-profit career trying to solve for terrorism in conflict areas like Iraq, Yemen, Syria with technology and skills. And finally realized, I think the conviction that a product in the hands of a user that finds product market fit, that helps them, this concept I call permissionless impact, where they don't need to go through anybody else to be able to help themselves. If we can get that, then we can solve something. And that's what I set out to do for mental health after my own struggle with depression. And very publicly said that I'm willing to fail doing this, but this is what I want to do now. Thankfully found angel investors who said, if you're willing to give your time to this, then we're willing to give your money. And today Wysa is something that has changed how access happens to mental health, because anybody can download Wysa and help themselves. And AI-driven cognitive behavioral therapy has been clinically proven to be at par with human therapy. Our own therapy has been proven to be at par, and people come out of depression and anxiety symptoms or get escalated to other services if they are more critical. But also, it overcomes stigma because it's anonymous. And rather than spending lots of money trying to tell people that they shouldn't talk about mental health, we focused on creating a product that stigma no longer becomes an issue. And like that, the idea was to just change the foundational structure of how mental health is delivered and absorbed. And that has panned out without a single dollar of marketing. Today, we have 4 million users globally. The governments of UK, NHS has adopted us as its strategy for mental health. Like Singapore government, we are their white label solution for mental health to their solutions. Corporates like Accenture and Aetna adopt us for their global workforces and members. So it's become now a profitable, valuable business as well as an impactful business. I think personally for me, there are almost 200 people who have written to us from our users who've downloaded the app for free and said, we're only alive today because we found this. And they come from all countries, 65 countries. And that's been really meaningful in this journey.
That's a truly incredible story and an incredible destination for now. Of course, it's still a journey, but destination for now. That's truly incredible. Fantastic. Randhula, you've also had a very interesting background. Maybe you could share it with us.
Sure. Thank you, Manas. And I think before I begin, I firstly must say how deeply moved and inspired I am by Jo's story and your journey. And I think that opening really is a great segue for me to explain the work that I do and why I do it as well. So I started my career in economic development here in Sri Lanka about 13 years ago. And I started it as the most natural way for limited opportunities that we have here through a development sector entity, which was an international development sector entity. And I worked in sectors of SME development. And what really drove me to do that work was to work with people who are on the ground and help them really create change for themselves, but also in their communities and with the people that they're attached to doing that work, in order to really achieve a bigger picture where people were having equal access to opportunities and really weren't killing each other to split the same pie. So it was really an effort to grow the pie versus splitting the pie. And that was really what motivated me to get into that work. And in the development sector, I work with a lot of SMEs, a lot of public and private sector entities, and I encountered very many colonial hangovers, so many archaic systems, so many models that are really not working, so many things that can really create so much of good, innovative change, but really was stuck in a plateau. And this was really sad. And it made me very restless. On the other hand, there was a lot of innovative young entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka who were coming in with a lot of passion, a lot of energy, a lot of drive, massive creativity. But unfortunately, about 10 years ago, when the startup ecosystem in Sri Lanka was emerging to be what it is today, most of the focus was really given to pure tech solutions. Tech was seen as an end, but really not as a means towards an end. And that's why Jo's story is so inspiring, because she's using technology as a means to get to human well-being. And that really made me realize, okay, hey, look at this. We have so much of goodness that Sri Lanka could offer to the world. And on the other hand, we have so much of innovation and creativity and talent. And these two things were just operating in their own silos and really weren't meeting each other. And Good Life X came about as an experiment that I started within the development sector entity, which was GIZ in Sri Lanka. It was a pilot project. People thought either I'm crazy or too innovative, too much of a troublemaker, too much of a disruptor to be doing that in a development sector entity. But it worked out. The results were amazing. The focuses we had was food and agriculture, wellness, and travel, because these are nature-based real life sectors that can really create a lot of change for people on the ground. And innovation was needed so badly in those sectors. So Good Life X started as an accelerator in 2019. But with the years and with the work that we've done with the entrepreneurs, we've created a spin-off now as an entity of its own. So it's now a private company, but again, driven to create conscious entrepreneurs and to cater to the conscious consumers of the world, so that Sri Lanka has a much better standing in the world. And perhaps one day, very soon, we would do the same with the South Asian entrepreneurs who are striving to create a similar change. So I think that's large part of the work that I do. But on the sides, I work with a lot of change makers in the creative sectors, in the media sectors, because my passion really is to create a positive society and a positive economic condition. So wherever I think my energy can be used, I try to give my time.
Thanks, Randhula. And the positivity of both of you and the optimism and the desire to change the world is just so inspiring. It's very inspiring. Jo, before we go further, I want to ask you about that terrorism-related ad. It's so interesting. It's the first time I've heard anything like that. Could you say a little bit about that?
Well, I was at Pearson and doing skilling. So getting young people skills across the world. Some projects in the Middle East as well. And a foundation had been set up with funding from the royal family of Qatar, with UN and World Bank, to say that money from the region should go into creating skills in young people in conflict areas in the region and getting them jobs, so that you could actually, that's the root cause of terrorism. And in fact, this was a year or two before the Arab Spring. So my partner quit his job at Goldman Sachs. We both moved to Doha and worked in these areas just as the Arab Spring hit. And then we found ourselves thrust in the middle of the G8, sitting in Tahrir Square, solving for some of these problems, going into Iraq, Yemen, Syria. One by one, everything blew up. One of my again, achievements I feel in life is the technology that we built to connect young people to jobs, which was a USSD-based technology that it doesn't require either data or credit, was the only technology left alive after ISIS had taken over in Iraq. And the Minister of Defense told us that the data he's getting now behind ISIS lines from the job connections that our technology was making is his best bet against actually defeating ISIS. So it ended up having implications that were much larger than what we'd envisaged. But again, I use technology because, in a conflict zone, your people have to leave the ground first. So traditional models of development just didn't work. So they brought someone like me in.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what would you say, in all this journey has been your proudest moment, right? The high water mark, or is that yet to come? I mean, I'm sure it's yet to come, but, so far.
I don't know whether there's pride. There's always gratitude, but there is a validation. There is a sense that the universe is signaling that you're on the right path and you can keep walking. So, and it's always starkest when it comes after the dark. So for me, I think having been depressed and having tried a couple of products that did not find product market fit, and not wanting to continue to do something that is either a cool technology or is not actually solving the problem. Even though I'd said I'm willing to fail at solving for mental health, there's that thing that, the first time you realize you're actually solving the problem was we'd released this app, with very little hope and no marketing. And 6 months later, this 13-year-old girl called Nora wrote to us, where you report issues in the app, saying, I have an issue. I am depressed. I'm 13. I tried to commit suicide. You're helping me hold on to myself. Thank you. It was a short message, but it just came to Ramakant and me. We were on holiday at that time. I remember we just hugged, and then we said, we're going to stop everything else and we're going to make this for girls like her, where there is that sense that there's nobody else for her to talk to, open up to, help through all of this as she tries to recover. And Wysa can be that. So that validation, I think, helped Wysa be what it was, helped me stay on. So probably that was a very important moment for us.
Yeah. So, and Jo, on the flip side, I'm sure there are tons of challenges, and some of them you already mentioned. But what do you think has been the most trying and testing aspect of this journey as an entrepreneur for you?
So there are two things. I would say that I co-founded with my partner in life. So I think for both of us, that is a decision we might have revisited if we did it again. It's amazing. So we don't see the benefits of it. We've always been a great team working together, and we still are. But it did mean that everything was amplified. So the lows got amplified. There was nowhere to escape to for either of us, and nobody who was outside your world. We sort of roped in as a part of this mission. Everybody we knew, our friends invested in us. So I think that became quite challenging, not having any space to escape to that wasn't consumed by this entrepreneurial journey. And And the other part, I would say, was just an internal values conflict. The concept of building a fundable business, quote unquote, versus solving a problem. So there's always this dichotomy, right? Like you say that, okay, I want to solve the problem, and I want to do it elegantly, asset light, all of those things. But I could have deployed my same time in a dozen other ways and made a business that was maybe 10x as valuable. But I think that part was challenging in the early days because it took us until COVID to find proper revenue. Like we had a sustainable direct-to-consumer business, but we were innovation tourism for everybody in mental health. Everybody knew us, wanted to talk to us, but nobody brought up the money. And then COVID happened, and suddenly revenue went through the roof, of course, because all these people had a need and we were the solution. But until then, when you have to just keep dragging it on your own resilience, on your own belief that one day the revenue would come, and people then say, or maybe you're not building a fundable business, you're a different type of business, that kind of thing, that was quite challenging.
But I think we are lucky to live in a time when eyeballs matter, and we can at least start to reconcile things like fundable business and impact. I think in the old world, when you were making things and manufacturing, the more traditional businesses, there was no way for these to come together, right? You would either be making money or you'd be doing good. And here, at least there's more chances of being able to get these together. So, Randhula, maybe switching to you, a couple of questions, right? We talk of the challenges entrepreneurs face, but this is also the week of Women's Day, and there's the theme this year is break the bias, right? So, what kind of biases do you think women entrepreneurs face typically? Right? Is that different for what a male entrepreneur faces, you think?
I think I have personally experienced a lot of biases that came my way. And if I ask myself the question, would a man get the same thing? Perhaps not, or maybe not in the same magnitude it was thrown at. And also it's a lot to do with how I choose my priorities. What battles do I choose to battle? And some things that are priority to me wouldn't be the priority to a male peer who's in the same game, right? So I think our styles differ, and therefore also, and women coming into leadership positions, especially in sectors like ours, doing work differently and really creating change and, rocking the boat a little bit is not seen too often. And people are overly cautious or want to build a box around it, which is a known box, in order to feel safe or to identify what this creature is all about. So I think I've faced it in two ways. One, in a gender sense, but I prefer not to look at things in a gender lens. But on the other side, as somebody who is trying to be disruptive or is trying to innovate or do something differently, of course, there's resistance. I think a few instances was when I was appointed the CEO of one of the largest accelerator and co-working space in Sri Lanka, Hatchworks. There were many who thought I'll resign in the first few months because I was the development sector girl. I come from the development sector, economic development. How can she run a company? What does she know about startups? Like, who is she? And these things I know wouldn't have come through if I was a guy with the same vigor and the same presence that I had. So I had to bite the bullet and work knowing that I have less supporters, and I have a lot to learn, and I have to learn also to be okay with failing. And to continue to learn and continue to do with the few supporters that I think who saw what I had in me, who were there to really walk the path with me. And I'm very glad I did so. And as more you progress, the less the noise becomes and the less it becomes relevant to you. So I think that was one of the biases that I faced. And even in the development sector, I was a very young girl, 24 years old, starry-eyed, wanting to change the world, giving all that I've got and celebrating every small win. And this energy was perhaps a little difficult, including to the women. And I understand a lot of people, perhaps in the very industrial era, in the very industrial generation, and even a very industrial education system that we have here in South Asia, are coming through a lot of competition, are coming through a lot of toxicity in the environment. And it's hard to receive things the way they are, or receive things from a place of love or from an open heart. So I think I didn't have a very pleasant 6 years being a newcomer, working and building my career. But I'm very glad that it didn't leave me bitter. It made me a person to want to lift as I climbed, and it made me give more and more opportunities to young girls to really be who they are and really be free to be who they are. So I think as women working in an environment, women put a lot of biases and undue pressure on a lot of other women too. But on the other hand, a lot of women are those who also helped me and made me grow and empowered me. So I wouldn't really label it as a gender thing. I think it's very much in the human nature to go with biases, be it gender biases, be it nationalities, be it education backgrounds, all of that. And I'm 100% educated here in Sri Lanka. And that too was a problem, like, oh, she's locally educated. Why not? Because right now, to be globally minded, it really doesn't matter. Information is in the brink of our hands. And I think a lot of people are now realizing that with all these amazing people who are stepping up their game, regardless where they come from and what their family name is or who their partners are. So I think we live in an amazing time to see and be witness of such change happening among us all along.
Randhula, that's a great set of points that you brought up, right? I mean, we all have so many biases, and we have to admit it to ourselves. And gender is one. I think gender is a real one. I think men, and I can speak at least for men in South Asia, but I guess men all over, because I've seen men all over. Men are threatened by strong women. There is this thing and they get over it, right? But the first instinct is that of being threatened, right? Then, I mean, many of them get over it, right? But so there is this aspect, but it's also, as you said, about everything else, right? So if I'm an engineer, I don't take pure management types or, development types or very seriously, or artistic creative types, and it's got to do with your education, it's got to do with your race, it's got to do with your age. If I see and we have to look, if you look within ourselves, we see the stirrings of these biases, right? I mean, and we have to just control them and manage them, right? And get rid of them. But the other thing which you said, which was very interesting, was you choose not to look only with the lens of gender and see it as a more complex and to some extent understandable challenge, but one that you have to work through, and not just the lens of gender. Jo, maybe could you tell us how you think about this topic?
Okay, I'll at the risk of being a little pedantic, there's a concept called information asymmetry, which at some point somebody won a Nobel Prize in economics for, but which is when you buy a used car, you know how bad your car is or good it is. The person buying it doesn't. So there is an information asymmetry between you and the other person. I think at least from an entrepreneur raising funding or somebody hiring, a lot of our biases come from the fact that there is information asymmetry. I know how committed I am to my entrepreneurial journey, how confident I am, how good my ideas are. The person funding me doesn't. And they have to look for proxies. And in any environment for information asymmetry, you typically will have some kind of certifications, for instance. Otherwise you bought a used car only from somebody you knew, which is the way entrepreneurship is happening. But say if you had a certification from this very well-known brand, so for me that was going to IIT, that helps you get past that information asymmetry, and now people are willing to transact with you. And there are many, many such certifications like that if I was ex-Google or ex-Amazon or so you've done a job here, or there's a wide variety of, or A or B or C believes in you, or you have already made your own small, smart startup and sold it, or and so on and so forth. So people also have biases around age. For people like me and Ramakant starting our career, we just didn't look hungry enough. We didn't look fast enough. We kept telling them that, look, we're not a unicorn, we're a cockroach. We just got to be resilient. That didn't help, I'm sure. We definitely weren't hungry enough to lie about anything. That probably said something. So, to some extent, I think a lot of that is really good. We just call it self-selection. So there were a lot of people who rejected us for many of their biases, but it's a good match, right? You don't need everybody to say yes. You need a few people who are right for you, who believe in you, to say yes. And then you have to get on and do your work, and your work has to speak for itself. So I think today there are enough people out there for us to be able to, and therefore not focusing on the gender lens helps, because then those people are not focusing on the gender lens. I don't think if anybody funded me because I was a woman, they would have been a good match to me either. So, the lack of gender lens in the person funding me was also important to me. And if they believed in me, what I could do, they got it. They liked the idea, they could contribute, they could challenge me. And we found a tribe of such people funding us. And I think you always do. And therefore, it's really important, as a woman, I say, to just forget that you're a woman and focus on your ideas. And the right people will find you. And there will be 1,000 people who doubt you for 100 reasons. But those right people will help you prove them wrong. And they exist.
That's a very empathetic way to explain biases, this information asymmetry, and the need to find proxies to create your opinion about someone. So I think it's really empathetic to the person with the biases. But I do completely agree with that model. I think it's also a positive model. It's also a model that argues for the role models, right? The role models, that break the biases, right? And I remember, growing up in India, we had this bias against dark skin colors, right? I mean, and it's a very strong bias in many families and parts of the country. And you just need some, folks like the Ambanis, or some the film actresses who are dark, etc., to change that, right? So I think some of these come from historical reasons, right? If you are able to maintain a light skin color in India, it means you don't go out to work. You can work from your home, and other people work for you. Things like that, right? But it's an interesting way to look at biases, and therefore the role models such as you both are really important for, if not role models, but exemplars to sort of break these biases. One question that somebody raised, by the way, it's just in case any of you are joining late, this is the Sommelier series, and we are here with Jo Aggarwal, who's the founder, CEO of Wysa, and Randhula de Silva, who is cultivating entrepreneurship in Sri Lanka, and with incubators and a whole ecosystem of entrepreneurship in Sri Lanka. But coming back to what we were discussing, and by the way, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and in about 10 minutes we will move to questions from the audience, right? But I have a couple of questions still to get out of my system. There's this idea, or there's actually this data that women entrepreneurs who are doing social ventures, they actually do pretty well. There are a higher number of ventures with social impact are founded by women, a significantly higher percentage of social ventures. What do you ascribe that to? Is it because women they care more about the world, or is it that somehow for investors and partners, it's more understandable to see a woman in that sort of role? What would you say to that?
Shall I take my a little provocative answer to that? So,
Right.
Manas, Pooja, Ramya, I think, we're three very close friends, all entrepreneurs walking the same journey. And we asked ourselves that, why are none of us trying to build a business that is the traditional VC business? And is there something to this sort of stereotype of women? And I think it is true. It is not true that just social impact inspires us, but I think to a lot of us, it is true that just being able to be your own boss and make money is not enough. So some kind of change the world. Most women who get to where we do, if you think about it, most of us, at least, to get to where we are, we have had to change the world around us a little bit to get to where we are. We've changed our parents' mindsets, our colleagues' mindsets, our bosses' mindsets. So we're already kind of change makers by the time you decide to be an entrepreneur. You're used to going against the tide. And a mindset that is used to going against the tide and has the confidence that it can change the world. There are a lot of men who would like to change the world. But when given an option of doing an e-commerce site and the other one, they're confident that they can do an e-commerce site based on the role models they have, based on how much they've had to have conflict with other people in the past, how much they have had to push their own agenda in the past. I think it's because we're stronger, because we've risen against the tide, that we're able to take those up. And a lot of the men, I find, and you'd know many of these people as well, after they make the money, they try to change their world. So it's not that they're not passionate about doing it, but the first confidence building exercise is often more in the mainstream.
I was getting goosebumps when you're talking about the journey to getting to where you are, it being about changing so many mindsets. That's so true. And it must be just a lot of effort. I mean, I don't mean effort in the sense of slog, but it must take a lot of confidence and a lot of clarity, not clarity, but at least momentum, right? To be able to change the world around you. And yeah, very, very, very good. And Randhula, sorry, go ahead, Jo.
I was just saying, when I was at IIT, my first, I don't know if you remember this, but I tried to be a dramatic secretary there. And the first time I came to your and other hostels asking for votes, I was told, hey, you're a girl, you're not mobile, you don't have a motorcycle. And my representative, Drams rep, said, if she wins, I'm going to buy a motorcycle and we'll drive around. And the fact that she had a motorcycle actually was the signaling that we needed, that we were not like other girls and we would actually do stuff. But we've had to change mindsets like that, in everybody for every opportunity. By the end of it, it gives you a lot of confidence. Those small victories end up changing you to say, I can do this. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Sorry, Randhula.
Two sisters who are both doctors and they're older than me. And I can tell you without any hesitation, they have far more self-confidence than I have, for sure. So, anyway, Randhula, what are your thoughts on that, on the social impact side with women?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I resonate 100% with Jo's take on it. I don't think there's any controversy in it at all. This really is a fact, and that's what we live every day. And I think, firstly, if I look at it in a personal perspective, when I also tell my story, I thought this was something actually wrong with me, good 5 years ago, that I don't speak on the aggregates or the numbers. But for me, the success really is in the journey, and the journey and the choices I've made and the people who've come along with me because of those choices and the choices that they've made as a result. So the ripple effects really is the success for me, and hardly the number of entrepreneurs or their revenue growth model, all of that. Yes, important. But for me, I think I draw a lot of pleasure from the story behind it and how much of change it has created intangibly as lives. So in terms of impact-driven ventures, again, yes, I totally have seen a lot of men who choose to, I think, lead until they're 50, 55 and build a very comfortable buffer and then come into the impact world to give back. A lot of respect for those people also who enable more and more people to work in those sectors. But I think women also has a knack for saying yes to something that is less obvious, that is less straightforward, that is far more challenging and not a typical unicorn business, or it doesn't fit into any of the boxes, but have the ability and the courage to say yes, and has the empathy and the nurture that it takes to grow something in barren land, if I may say so, into something that flourishes into a massive tree. And I think we see a lot of women who've done such changes that are not even claiming those successes. But we see results of their work socially, entrepreneurially, economically, all around us. And I think now with the more and more women leaders stepping out and more platforms like this for women to speak up, we see such models and identify the women behind such models and work that we can resonate with and connect with and become inspired by as well. So also, when I was creating a spin-off and interesting stories, I had a very talented young man who built the accelerator with me. He was trained to do it with his eyes closed, but he didn't want to come out of the development sector entity when I was creating this private limited company as a spin-off. And the people who said yes to it are right now in my team are all girls. So I have a team of all girls because they had the balls, if I may say so, to say yes to something like this in the middle of a pandemic, and say, we believe in the change that you're creating. And they're starting their careers or, at the peak of their careers. So it's not like that they can afford economically to take such a risk either, but they said yes regardless because they saw laterally how much of change this is going to drive, and they were driven by that. And I have a lot of respect for my team, therefore, and I would do anything. I think most of the days when things get really tough, it's them and the change that we're creating that drives me. So I think women has the ability to see things laterally and empathically grow. And I think gone are the days where ventures are drawn into boxes of, okay, social enterprise and VC enterprise. But I think the enterprises of future are going to be built on principles of humanity, principles of sustainability. And we are all striving to build businesses that can do good while doing well. And that really is going to be the future. So I think we're just gearing up to build more and more entrepreneurs who are driven to create profitable enterprises by doing good.
So much in that, what you said, that's really valuable. I think the idea that women are stronger and can think a bit laterally because of the experience they have, I don't think it at least I wouldn't like to believe that it's genetic or in the hormones, but it's more going to do with the journey, as you said, Jo, to get there, that they're able to think more broadly. I also think that the alpha male kind of stereotype, I'm sort of grossly caricaturizing it, but it is so competitive, right? And when you're very competitive, you can't pull back and think sideways. You just see the race that's being run and you run after that. And just for the record, I don't count myself as an alpha male type of person. Just for
you don't come across like one.
Thank you.
But you probably face the repercussions of not being one sometimes.
See, not now, but when you talk of biases, I can, especially in the US, I felt this, that being a sort of retiring kind of person who's not pushing their agenda all the time or not being larger than life, etc. It was a big drag, and I consciously decided to move back to Europe and India, where I felt that my style worked better, right? Because it's not right or wrong. It's just a different style, and maybe I was in the wrong company or the wrong sets of people, etc. in the US, but I did feel this, that I didn't fit in, as well. But Jo, that's a good segue to another part, another question that I had. Do you see this the way women are perceived as entrepreneurs, as leaders, different in the US and India, because you live half and half, I guess, with these two countries.
And across the world. In fact, I was in the Mobile World Congress, I remember, with these women leaders, not intentionally so, but I guess social impact work. So a lot of them were women. One was a very senior person in Qualcomm, one in Intel, one in a nonprofit, me. And we were just trading stories over drinks in Barcelona. And I realized that we women in India are actually very privileged. Because while we do face biases, we also have some very strong support, especially from our fathers. I've seen that a lot of, for instance, the kind of stories that came out were things like, a doctor father who would only ever imagine that his daughter would become a nurse and never a doctor. You cannot imagine that in India. Right? I mean, that's just not envisageable that any father would limit a daughter's academic achievements or potential to do that.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I know that's because we inhabit this very elite layer. I mean, the rest of the country, so we are also a little bit looking at just a very, 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 very thin.
I wasn't that elite, by the way. I mean, I came from a family where my father rose himself out of poverty. I was the first girl to have a profession. My sister was the first girl to be a doctor, and everybody told him, if you make her a doctor, then you will have to spend that much money on a groom that would be a doctor for her. And it was a path that we crossed for the first time in our extended family. There was nobody else that we could look to who had been given an education, been allowed to go to a hostel. And that's true for a lot of women for our generation. Even so, we had fathers who believed in us. Even so, we had one person who, when they saw that their child was bright, did not see it purely with the lens of gender, while another society where the society was very accepting of women doctors, about my age, America, but there would be fathers who just did not believe that their daughter could be anything more. So I think we had a very different type of battle. Their battles were often much more private at home, not around marriage, but around the belief that they could do something, while our battles were very much about, no matter what you do, no matter what you achieve, it is your marriage that defines you if you're a woman. And so you're a failure if you did not get married in a way that they wanted, and so on and so forth. I remember I taught chemical engineering my first year, and people said that I'd get a scholarship, and I went home and told my parents, and even they, very supportive, said, okay, this is our limit. We're not going to send you abroad without getting you married, because that's sort of how much we can fight society for you. and so there is, and I promptly stopped studying and started doing dramatics, which I think was a good idea. But sorry, I'm not sure I answered it, but I think
this is. I mean, I think the question was around the US and India, the difference between the US and India with respect to women, and it was just like a casual question. But I guess what the answer that you gave was there are different in each society. There are different challenges that you're facing. Maybe not with respect to academics, but with respect to personal freedoms and or vice versa. So yeah, you did answer that.
We get a lot more child support. We get people to take care of our children when we go to work. That's a huge issue in the West. Yeah. So the amount you have to be able to earn in order to be able to go to work is a lot more. It's harder to be an entrepreneur.
But again, Jo, I feel that a lot of these changes, these differences are because we are in a very thin band of well-to-do, and even if we say out of poverty, it's not really grinding poverty usually, right? I mean, so I don't know enough to generalize.
Fair enough. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying that I wasn't privileged. I was very privileged, but I was more privileged that my father broke out of the mindset of his generation. And the mindset, when I said of a lower middle class mindset where women do not have careers or jobs or in my entire extended family. I think that mindset break was much more important. Money, you can get a scholarship, you can get people to fund you. Sometimes that needing to choose between your parents and your aspirations is what binds women back much more.
Right. Absolutely. So Randhula, just to pick it up from there, right? So what do you think that families can do to help build a more gender neutral world? And then, maybe what individuals or companies can do. But let's start with families, because that part is not talked about as much as, what companies can do. So companies are all
Sure.
at least aware that they need to work on it and they're trying their best. But a lot of what's holding women back is at the families, right? And we're also families. I mean, we're part of the families. It's not someone else, it's us. But any thoughts there from your experience?
Sure. And Manas, before maybe I touch on to that specific question, I really want to contribute to the previous conversation that you had about alpha male culture and mindset. And I'll build up my answer to the family questions from that, because I think there's something in there that can have a connection. I don't think why I say we shouldn't consistently look at these things from a gender lens also is because there's a lot of women who lead like men, because that's what we've seen. That's what we've been taught to do. That's how we celebrate success. So I think whatever identity that we are born with biologically also doesn't define how we work and what we bring to the table in our workplace or in our societies. And I see a lot of change around the world that I too advocate, where there's much more empathetical leadership that comes onto the table. I think there's a lot of interesting models coming out of India as well, like Shakti leadership, where women and their femininity and their empathetic behavior is brought to the table, even for men to learn from and to adapt into their leadership styles and managerial techniques. And I think that is the conversation that we need to have, so more and more people understands what different approaches can we bring to the table to have a much more holistic leadership approach overall. And I think there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot for us to unlearn as women too. And if I go to the home context and bring an example of a peer that I work with here in Sri Lanka, who's as old as I am, and she is a daughter of a father who's a very successful businessman and alpha male. And she was first, until 33 years old, she was told to be pretty, to not go in the sun, to be fair, to be a princess, if I may use that word. But she's a heavily talented, intelligent girl who has so much of creativity and power in her to contribute with her ability. But she thought it was wrong for her to be seen in a boardroom. No man would want to marry me. This is too much. This is really not for me. And she really internalized all of it. And she has zero self-confidence in all of this. It took a lot of other peers like myself working beside her that she could just look up to or look towards and learn from and step out of that shadow and say, hey, maybe I can too. And she did over a period of just a couple of years. And her father is mentoring her now to become a better leader. But I see her a changed leader, and she's now elbowing every other woman her way to the top because she's learning from her father, right? Who is the industrial generation alpha male. So I think there's two lessons here. One thing, when we have kids, when we have children in our homes or in our communities, because in South Asia, like Jo said, we have been blessed with very beautiful, vast, extended families and tight communities. Well, sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's not, but it truly can be used for your advantage when you want to grow an idea and nurture your kids. But what values do we put in? What do we celebrate? What do we encourage? Why do we celebrate a boy climbing a tree and not a girl. I was very privileged because my parents weren't at home to tell me no. They were both working parents. So I grew up the wild child, and I'm so glad I did. And I wish more of that for more girls, to explore their nature, to explore their boundaries of their heads, and to not grow under that patriarchy coming through the parents, either the mother, father, or siblings, but to explore her identity not as a girl, but as a full and complete human being. And to exercise the length and breadth of her mind of what does she want to learn? How does she want to express herself? Is it through mathematics or arts? It really doesn't matter. It's up to her. So to, I think, bless the child's needs and want, and be there to, heal her wounds when she makes a wrong choice too, I think is the duty of all of us. And when we have women coming into the work cultures, women and men, I think we have to have an environment where this megalomaniac culture of war is not celebrated, but a much more conducive, collaborative environment is nurtured. And that is what we can do through business. But I think all of that starts at home, because we all have homes, we all come from families, and we bring our best selves to work, but we are all one person, either at home or at work. So I think tweaking your personal value systems and tweaking your biases, unconscious or conscious, needs to start from home.
Yeah, and I see this with Scandinavia, right? So we have lots of Nagarians in Scandinavia, and we get a chance to work there with clients, etc. And the culture there is, I think if you had to look at gender neutral cultures, Scandinavia is furthest along probably, right? And you see it in the way families are organized, the way the laws are written, the way the whole ecosystem is built. You see it in the way, the leadership of companies. You see it at every level, right? And it's fiercely protected and fiercely driven, and they feel that they have a long way to go as well, which perhaps they do, but much shorter than we have, or in many other parts of the world. But I could go on and on. I just would like to take the questions that are coming in. I'll just take a couple of questions. We just have 8 minutes. So the question that from Rishi Raj, right? What are some of the things that we could do in our day-to-day lives at home and professionally to make the world more conducive for women entrepreneurship? Maybe I hold off on this question. I want to talk a little bit more general rather than what women, the women aspect. So this is question here: if you had one thing to tell a future entrepreneur, what would it be?
Andra, go first.
Make shit that matters.
That matters. Okay. All right. I suspect your answer will be very similar, but why don't you take a shot?
I just don't believe your own, stop selling a story and start asking whether what you're building is actually working. I think the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make is that their story starts selling and they think that that's it. And then after that, they realize that there's a gap between the reality and their story, and they're trying to bridge it. So I'd tell them that, wait till you have a story that has been proven to you before you start selling it.
It's almost the same as make sure that matters. But, I think that watch out for failure modes, because they're all around you. I failed in so many startups that I can list like 12 failure modes. Each one I had 3 learnings from, right? Just watch out for failure modes. But anyway, the question was really to you. The second question is, in hindsight, what do you wish you had known? I mean, so what do you wish you had known which would have made your journey easier?
Can I turn this back to you?
You're asking me the question?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah.
Well, I always was ready to fail. I failed many times. So I was ready to fail. But I think I know the one thing. When people say that this can't be done, they may be right. So, very often you realize that, the conventional wisdom is conventional wisdom for a reason, and you realize it much later. And you also realize that simply having a need doesn't mean the need can be filled. I'm sorry to have such a negative statement, but doesn't mean the need can be filled. It doesn't mean that the need can be filled profitably. It doesn't mean that a defensible company can be built around that. But I must say that I just love entrepreneurship, and I love entrepreneurs. So don't take any of this negatively. I think whether you are in a startup, or whether you are as a citizen in a society, even right, or in a family, you have to be able to dream that this can change, things can change, right? And I just love the spirit of entrepreneurs to leave the shore behind and go and do something different, right? At grave risk. At the worst point of my life, even my parents had lost faith in me, right? So I would say, come to my office, and they'd say, once your company survives a few years, we'll come to see your office, because everything was failing, right? So but it's really, really, really cool to have folks like you go out and try to create new companies out of nothing. Maybe one last question, right? And this is a question. Let me not do the Rishi Raj question. There's another question is quite interesting. How do you inspire men at home to is there a silver bullet to inspire men to take their duties at home equally seriously, and raising children without thinking they're doing a favor to the woman? Is there any silver bullet?
I have one line advice that I give all women, young women I meet. I say, marry a grown-up.
Oh, so well said. That's I think. So that's such a solid answer. Yeah, I think I'm so privileged to have a partner who's not insecure by me or whatever that I achieve, and also is not waiting to look me down or say, I told you so when I fail. Because, all the successes are celebrated, but there's so many tough days. There's so many failures that comes with it. We are not superheroes. It's very important that you have a partner who you can lean on, but also who's fanning your flames when you're successful. But I think for me, sure, he's a grown up, even in terms of the year gap, much older than I am. So I think that works very well. But what helped me was the COVID lockdown. And he saw how much of work that I am doing on a daily basis with my team. And that really made him step down from, the spoiled, privileged Sri Lankan man to doing a lot more than he used to. So I think I wish I had been so transparent earlier, but you start working from home 24/7, some things get exposed only then.
Well, we're out of time, but I must say it's been a real joy to talk with you both, and I'm sure our listeners also had a good time, and a lot of interesting things here. And we don't change the world with one episode of a program like this, but I think it's another brick in the wall. So thank you very much for taking the time out for us.
Thank you, Manas and Jo. It was an absolute pleasure listening to you.
Likewise.
Thank you.